Welcome to the Family Brand Show. We're Chris and Melissa Smith of FamilyBrand.com, husband and wife, parents of 5, and we want to help you take back your family and to live life on your terms.
And we know being a family can feel really overwhelming. Parents tell us they feel like they're being pulled in a million different directions. It's so challenging to navigate the uncertainty and all the chaos that's happening in the world right now.
And that's why we want to bring you every single week actionable tips and strategies that you can implement in your daily life to become a better parent, to become a better spouse, and to build a stronger family. And look, there's never been a better time and a more important time than right now to take back your family. You can define what your family stands for, or the world is going to do it for you. And the world needs strong families now more than ever. And it starts right here with your family.
On this week of the Family Brand podcast, I have the pleasure of welcoming Angus Nelson. Welcome, Angus, to the podcast, to the show.
I'm ecstatic to be here, Melissa. Let's do this.
Amazing. I love the energy you're bringing already. So Angus and I had the opportunity to meet virtually. We are both in a coaching program together with Dan Martell, and he is always encouraging us to collaborate. And I'm grateful for this opportunity that Angus and I have had to connect. And he has a new book coming out. We'll get into that. But when he was telling me about his book, I was like, "Ooh, this is a cool topic that I think a lot of families, parents, entrepreneurs can relate to and would love hearing about." And so, again, we'll jump into that. But that's kind of the context that brings us here today. So, Angus, tell us, what should my listeners know about you? Who is Angus Nelson?
I was born at a very young age. I'm a parent myself. I have 3 children, 29, 15, and 14. I live in Lisbon, Portugal. I'm an executive coach, and I love to help entrepreneurs get the hell out of their own way.
How often do entrepreneurs get in their own way?
93.76% of the time, I believe, is the most scientific answer. But yeah, and admittedly, I get in my own way too. It's one of those things where we all need someone outside ourselves to read the label on our own jar. And getting in our own way is all the stories we build into our heads based on history, based on the past. And then we fill our identity according to whatever story and meaning, we've given to all of that. And it becomes a bit of a mess. And it's also the blockers that keep us from what we're capable or what we desire or what we deserve.
So we're speaking specifically about entrepreneurs, but I bet a lot of this relates to just life in general, even if you don't happen to be an entrepreneur. But, for this conversation, as entrepreneurs, is there one blocker that you'd say comes up more often than others for people?
I think the biggest one that comes up, I would say actually a tie. Fear of failure and imposter syndrome. Those are like the 2 that I think are the major ones. And so fear of failure, I think in many ways is actually the antithesis, is the fear of success. Meaning we think we don't want to do something because what if I fall on my face? What are people going to say? What if I look like an idiot? What if I lose everything I've already got? Blah, blah, blah. But I think when you really boil it down, it's actually a fear of success, because success, if you play it out to the line of the continuum, there's this question in your mind of, what do I have to give up? What do I have to change? What do I have to let go? How do I need to address these stories in my head? And that seems more scary because it's something unknown versus I know my chaos. I'm comfortable in my chaos and I can be perfectly happy living in the existence I have today. But stepping outside of that can be scared. You can be scared spitless. And that's why I say success, a place you've never been, can feel like it's even more threatening than leaving the place that you're at for something that may fail, but at least you're still in your own, sphere that And this is like, even in families, we do this all the time in our, our different roles. Oh, you're the oldest sibling. Oh, then you must fill a certain role. But the moment you stop filling that role, everybody freaks out.
Yeah, the little dances that we play, but we don't realize that we're always making the same steps until someone maybe takes not even a misstep, but a different step than they normally take.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh wait, this isn't how we do it.
Precisely. And do you have siblings?
I do. I have 8 siblings and I'm the oldest.
You have 8 so okay, so you know this all too well. 9 kids, your parents, bless their hearts.
Yeah, same parents. So we always were raised together.
And in that same way, we fill our certain roles, and then you dare not step out of that role. For me, I was the oldest of 3. I have an identical twin brother, and then I call him my younger brother because he's not my little brother. He's like 6'8", so
Well,
he just towers over me. I left some inches in the womb, I guess. He When my family had holidays, me and my wife were the ones that always planned, oh, where we're gonna be, what we're gonna do, what we're gonna eat. And one year we decided, we've done this for a good decade or so. Like, how about somebody else take charge? And you would have thought I stabbed somebody's puppy. Like, people were so mad in the family, and it goes so bad. We didn't have Thanksgiving, and then that pain went into Christmas, and we didn't have a Christmas either. And I
wow.
had to be okay with that. But it's that same thing, even in our own, whether it be your marriage role, whether it's in your business role, when we change or when we transform into the next level, there's twofolds. One is preparing ourselves to become the person we want to become. And then number 2 is being prepared for how people will react to it. And even if they react negatively, typically that's temporary. They just have to adjust to the new person that you've become.
You said that going back just a smidge, we're talking about the fear of failure and that
Mhm.
how that is a huge blocker for people. How do you coach someone? I know this is a short podcast and this is
Yeah.
like a complicated question, but what would you say if someone is feeling that way? Like they realize that that is a blocker and that is holding them back. How do you coach someone through that?
So a couple things. One is in and of itself, the way you framed that is built around a story. Oh, we have a short podcast. There's no way you can answer that. So you've already put us in some kind of a category of an answer, right? And then number
Hmm.
2 is the perception is, if I'm going to change my life, if I'm going to do something different, it's going to be hard and it's going to take a long time. And those are stories we tell ourselves. We think that the challenges in our lives are like these sequoias or redwoods, these massive trees with roots that go deep into the earth. When in all actuality, a lot of them are more like weeds. And once you pull them up, you can pop them right out of the ground. Super simple. Just by making a decision and giving permission. And so a fear of failure, for example, is built around some story that you told yourself that you're not worthy, you don't deserve, or you don't have what it takes. As an example, those are 3 of the top ones. And what if instead you put those aside and you just asked yourself, who would I be without these excuses? And then secondarily, who must I become to make sure and to assure that I'm successful? And those take you down a path of opportunity and possibility and remove all of the scarcity, all the fear. And it's not to say that that stuff doesn't help. Having a little bit of skepticism, having a little bit of, what if this fails type of thing, like that's natural, that's human, that's okay. But it should never stop you from being curious to what could be. And the fear of failure is just nothing more than keeping you from that thing that your heart, your spirit, your soul, your intuition is whispering to you. Come on, you can do this. Come on.
What if it's funny, Chris, my husband, we were just talking about this earlier today, saying that I wonder if that thing that you're whispering there, that your soul is whispering. What if you have gotten to a point where you feel like, well, do you believe people can get to a point where either maybe they've stopped listening and they don't hear it anymore? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's possible. Like anything, self awareness is something we think we have, and many people just simply do not. They're reactive. They're impulsive, they're reactionary. Like most human beings just operate like a pinball in a pinball machine. And we don't realize that our world is like activating us in this direction, bouncing left, right, boom, 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 bang, 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 bang. Versus when you get quiet, when you do meditation, when you do yoga or Pilates or anything that requires you to get quiet and you can get focus into being present, you can start to hear things you otherwise wouldn't hear. But what happens is when we start hearing those things, then we start putting a meaning to it, like, oh, that's just me making something up. Oh, that's not me. I just, my thoughts running crazy. And we start to doubt ourselves. And so the more you start to neglect that intuition, the more you actually, when you do hear it, have less inclination to listen to it. And most of the people that I've encountered, it's not like, for instance, oh, I'm talking to Angus. I'm interested in coaching, just a little curious. What can you tell me? And they make me do a little dog and pony show. Well, this is what we do. These are people who help. This is the results we get. Duh, duh, duh. Act now, get these free Ginsu knives. Like we go through this thing, and I'm being a little facetious, of course, but at the end of the day, it's like, oh, I believe you're a good coach. I can see your content, or I can hear your words. I can read your book. I get it. That sounds amazing. I think you're the real thing. Number two is, man, you've helped other people. Look at this story. Look at that story. I totally believe you get results for people. That's awesome. But then the third piece is the hard piece for most people. Can you do it for me? And ultimately, that's not based on who I am or what I've done as a coach. It's rather their own belief and or confidence in themselves. Can I do this? Will I be disciplined? Will I stay the course? Will I persevere? Or will I chicken out? Will I mess up? Will I do, and whatever story it is, what I've always done, I've never walked it out fully. I've never finished a thing. And they start telling themselves, and they tell themselves stories and they ruminate of the past, of why they didn't, why they couldn't, or why they shouldn't. And this becomes our programming, our little inner computer. And now we're stuck. So those things perpetuate, and your intuition has lost its magic.
So if someone's listening right now and they feel like they don't have a clear something that's calling them forth, sounds like you would recommend get quiet in order to get clear. And then also get confident that you can achieve what you want to achieve, which I think leads to, the book that I mentioned earlier that you wrote that is all about confidence, specifically confidence comes later.
Yeah.
How the quest for certainty is holding us back. Can you talk more about that confidence comes later?
Nobody does anything with confidence. Nobody. Confidence only lives in the past. Confidence is something because you accomplished something you've achieved, something you've done. And then you could say, oh, I feel confident about that thing. I operate in that role. I made that kind of money. I swooned that woman. Like I'm confident about my skill set or my achievement, and all of it's based on the past. Then we step into something new. I'm going to start this new business. I'm going to get back up on my feet after a divorce. I'm going to, take a stage and finally speak in front of an audience for the first time. Anything like that is new and different. And it's like I told you earlier in our conversation, is like that new and different thing. Oh, I don't know about that. And then we use confidence, and I'm putting air quotes for those of you listening at home or in the car or on the lawnmower or wherever you're at. And you're saying to yourself, well, I can't do this because I'm not confident. But if I was confident, I would step out and do this. And the truth is, the activity, the task at hand doesn't require your confidence. And it's an impossibility for you to think that that's the case, but it's the excuse we use so we don't have to step into something new. Instead, confidence should be in my capacity, my resilience, my courage, and my ability to figure out things along the way. And if I should step into this new thing, have so much belief in myself that even if it goes sideways, even if I fall on my face, I'm going to be just fine. And so the whole core of this is, will you take action? Because you can never get to confidence until you take action. You take action, you fulfill a thing, and suddenly you're confident in doing that thing. And then what's the next thing? Well, you're not going to be confident for that either. So take action. Act on it. You take that first step, the next step will reveal itself. And suddenly, logically, this starts to make sense. But emotionally, that's the hiccup. That's where the people start telling them there's those stories that we were talking about before. And so once you reverse the stories, and then your sense of belief, your sense of self, your sense of confidence in who you are starts to grow by leaps and bounds. And suddenly your results get to be growing by leaps and bounds too.
I have a thought here about a place that I've been in before that I venture to guess there are people listening who are as well. And relating to confidence. I have 5 children, and there's been a time in my life where so much of my life and my time was taken up with like raising the babies.
Yeah.
And so when it came time to like do something outside of that, I felt like I don't know what I'm doing. I maybe lacked the confidence. But there was still a gap between like what you're saying, you have to have the belief in yourself. I still think sometimes there's maybe still a gap between confidence and knowing like that resilience that you maybe know innately that you have. I don't know if my question is quite making sense yet. I'm kind of formulating as I go, but so maybe just to reiterate, what if you have a gap and you're like not even sure? Like, yes, you don't have confidence, but secondarily, you don't even know, do I have resilience? Do I have what it takes even before that confidence?
Yeah. And this is the work that I do. And I don't care if I'm helping someone with $100 million brand or someone who's, barely scratching 6 figures. All of it's the same. And it's this belief system we have about ourselves. And we've built, again, that reference I made before is these stories. And it's inputs that we put into our supercomputer, our brain, our mind, our heart, our soul. And we've told ourselves these stories, or someone did something to us. Maybe it was a second grade teacher, maybe it was that high school football coach, or maybe it was a parent who said something in such a way or such a tone or treated you in such a way that you had an experience and it hit you deeply emotionally. And what neuroscience teaches us is that logic and emotion, when put together, become a very strong glue, both positive and negative. And what happens is we will place a meaning on that scenario, and then that will become part of our identity. And so this gap that you're speaking about is because we've placed our value for ourselves into this supercomputer and said, this is who I am. And I've built my identity around a story. And unfortunately, the majority of those stories are bullshit. It's not true. They're just stories we made up. And my work and what I do with my clients is about changing those stories and the belief system. So in that same computer now, we take away all of the negative inputs and we start replacing them with positive inputs. So daily affirmations. We have principles for our lives and values and things that we rehearse throughout the day, things that re-qualify us as the strong, brave, beautiful, courageous people that we see ourselves to be. And then we start to imagine that into the future. And I say, you just start with 12 months. Who could you be in 12 months? And you start to build this construct of power, this construct of being and presence. And most of us operate in a place of either fear, intimidation, or we don't want to stand out, because what if we stand out? People are going to think, oh, who do you think you are? Which in the UK, they have that, and the Aussies, they call it the tall poppy syndrome, when you start to stand out from everyone else. And even that becomes a story. So now we're afraid of our shine. We're afraid of our glory. We're afraid of our power, our dominion, our authority. And so we play small. And we accentuate the gap, because if I stay in the gap, I have an excuse not to be who I'm capable of. And the truth is, the world and the universe is hungry and thirsting for people to be fully themselves. And most of us shy away from that for all the wrong reasons. And I'll just tell you a quick story where all this came from and why I know this to be true. In
Please.
1998, I started a business with my brother, and it was an arts-driven youth center. And we had tons of kids come through our doors every day, and we decided to put on a big music festival. And we needed 4,500 people to show up. And that day we had thunder showers and only 1,400 people showed up. We lost $72,000 that weekend. And for our small little organization, that was a heap of cash.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to ask for help. I just did what I always knew to do at that time. And that was just to put my head down and work harder. I was doing 70, 80, 90-hour work weeks. My wife and I moved into my parents' basement to regroup and to pay off all the loans. And I felt that it was an integrity for me to make sure everybody got paid back. And underneath that stress, I started drinking. And then it turned to porn. And then it turned into sleeping around. My wife had grown to despise me for the hours I was putting in. And so I was going to prove her wrong. I was going to prove my board wrong. I was going to prove the community wrong, until I blew up my marriage. I blew up the business, and I blew up my sense of self. I was divorced on December 23rd, 2003. 2 days later was Christmas. And I was weeping underneath my Christmas tree, contemplating how I was going to take my life. And I heard a voice, and it said, "We're not done here yet." And that next week, I enrolled in counseling and started learning about psychology and human behavior and all my narcissism and selfishness and all the things I did that played into the destruction of that business and my marriage and myself. And now I've made it my mission to make sure that other business people don't go through these same things, that other people don't get so entangled in crap stories where marriages have to suffer or kids have to be split apart because of our lack of ability to understand our true power, our lack of ability to have true awareness, empathy, compassion, integrity, and character. And all that comes from doing work that's on the inside, not the outside.
Thank you for sharing your story. That's incredible. I'd like to hear more about, you kind of led us to maybe before and after in a way. And I know we've
Mhm.
spoken also that there is even more to this story about you moving to Portugal, and you had a travel blog and took a year off for travel. Can you
Yeah.
tell us more about that part of your life as well?
Wow. So flash forward. Okay. So we'll go into the adventurous part of this story. We'll turn it from the somber into I don't know. I don't know the word, but
I want to
uh,
capture this part before we go, because I think this is a super cool
yeah.
part of
So,
the story
so
too.
from that season, flash forward a decade or so, I married another woman who became the apple of my eye. She was amazing. And we had made some agreements before we got married. We got counseling even before we started dating. We were getting marriage counseling or relationship counseling. She'd been divorced. I'd been divorced. I call that her practice husband. It's my practice wife. And now we're in it to win it, right? And we started having kids, and we had a decision that we were like, hey, she spent 3 years in Germany. Her practice husband was in the military. My mom was from New Zealand. And my dad had been in the Navy, and they always said, grab a backpack and go. So when I got out of school in my 20s, I was always traveling. I was working for a company out of California. We were living in Alabama at the time. Suddenly we're like, hey, we can work remote. Let's sell our house and go. And so every month we're in a different city. This is 2014. And our two youngest kids at the time were 3 and 4. And so my wife started homeschooling the two youngest as we were traveling. And so we were all the way from San Diego to Aruba. And every month we'd go to a new place, we'd go to the thrift stores and we'd go get some toys and we'd stay at these Airbnbs and, have a life. And then all of a sudden we're making plans for the next place. And then we donate the stuff back to the thrift store, go to the next city and go to the next thrift store and get the kids. I think we made my son a bit of a hoarder at the time as a result. And I was like, I'm not giving up my stuff anymore. And we did that for a full year.
Wow.
And the experience it was to be with our kids. And I especially had an affinity for that because just a couple years prior, I was actually the stay-at-home dad. So I was the main caretaker. And for the first 3 years, I had a toddler and an infant at the time. And so my wife had a great job. She worked for this education or for higher ed. And she did that until she didn't want to do it anymore. And we swapped places. And so now we get this other adventure. So I always had this really close knit connection with my kids. Well, we made plans. We made the little vision board and we said 2024 is going to be the year that we have an international adventure, let our kids be able to see the world through a different lens. In the middle of COVID, we're sitting on the couch. My wife turns to me and says, we got to go. And I'm like, where are we going to go? And so we started looking at different countries and it started off with like Greece and Croatia and Montenegro. And we just love that Dalmatian coast and the Mediterranean life. And then we're like, these kids, they're not going to be able to speak these languages anywhere but there. Like, so they have this experience. And then what? Like, okay, yeah, regroup. Okay, what do we? So we looked at Spain. At the time, Spain didn't yet have a nomadic visa. And we kept hearing about Portugal. Now, in all of our travels, that was one country we'd never been to. But once we started doing research, and then I kept stumbling over more conversations, more people were talking about it, and then some TV shows. One was a show called Somebody Feed Phil on Netflix. If you haven't watched that show, I love that show. Mm-hmm. And he went to Lisbon. And I was like, holy cow, that place looks amazing. And we, in December, pulled the trigger and we said, okay, let's do it. And we filed all the paperwork. We got our house set up to rent, basically just went through all of our stuff and simplified. Marie, Kondo would have been so proud of us, just like unloading all of our stuff. And it was hard and saying goodbye to, the life we knew in Nashville, Tennessee, and all of our stuff and the beautiful home that we had and our friends. Like, we're on our way to adventure, but you also grieve, the letting go. And I think that's kind of a metaphor for so much in our life is we try to hang on to things we don't need to hang on to anymore. They don't no longer serve us. And when we made the decision in December, we were on the ground, boots on the ground in May. And we showed up at the airport. And when I say we, let me define this, because it wasn't all 4 of us. We have a 5th child who stayed in the States. She's older. She's on her own. And she's moving to Portugal in February. So all 5 of us will be back together again. But we're getting ready to take off on our flight on a Monday morning. And we get a text from the airline that said, you're flying through Germany. In Germany, you need a 24-hour COVID test. And we only had a 72-hour COVID test. So you have to go take another test. Holy crap. This is just crazy. Monday morning, we're racing around. We find a place, $500 later for all of us to take this rapid test. And my daughter tested positive for COVID.
Oh my God.
So my wife and my daughter stayed, me and my son, 2 big ass dogs and 14 bags, got on a plane and flew to Portugal. And it was crazy. It was so insane how hard it was. And then landing in, I hadn't done a lot of research about our actual neighborhood like my wife had done. So suddenly I'm like thrown to the wolves, and my son and I just had this adventure of like, where do we go? Where do we shop? What kind of brands? Like we were just clueless. And we were by ourselves for those first 2 weeks while my daughter healed up. And then she kept testing positive, even though she had no symptoms. So my wife's like, screw this. We're getting out of the hotel. She went back to Nashville. We were in Atlanta, and went back, hung out with my daughter, and then bought brand new plane tickets because they wouldn't change our tickets. So we lost 2 plane tickets and all of it too. $6,000 later, after all of it was said and done, my wife and daughter landed, and we got to celebrate. We got to get them all into the apartment. And then the next day I tested positive. And then I was down for the count that next week. So all of it was a lot of crazy, but I share all that to say, like, even as you're moving towards things that you desire, resistance will come. And never think that the resistance is to put you back in your box. I believe the universe will bring resistance to you to show you just how powerful you are. And it gives you an opportunity to flex new muscles and operate at different levels than what you've ever experienced before. And so if you're stepping into something new, one thing is to believe that place of courage of who you are and that you're going to be okay. And then number 2 is that when the resistance reveals itself, to go back to step 1, remind yourself who you are. You're going to be just fine.
That was a beautiful way to tie those where we started and where we ended back together. So thanks for tying a bow on that so beautifully.
We podcasters, we pay attention.
How can people connect further with you, Angus?
Come and find me on all the places. I'm Angus Nelson, but specifically you can find me on Instagram at Angus Nelson. And part of our discovery working with people is that we have these blockers, some of the things we've just been talking about today. And so if you go into my DMs and just put the word blocker, I'll send you an assessment that'll reveal to you an area. There's 6 different areas that people experience when they're building their business or they're trying to move forward. The belief system that they have that holds them back. And so if you're interested to learn more about yourself and what's keeping you back, go to Angus Nelson, type in the DM blocker.
Awesome. Thank you. And you have a book coming out also. So
and that'll be out in Q1 of next year. And it's called Confidence Comes Later.
Okay. So go connect with Angus so you can be prepared for when that releases as well. You don't know this. We'll have to talk about this sometime. We led very parallel lives in 2020 because we sold our house, cars, etc., moved our whole family and our 2 dogs to Hawaii. So when you were talking about it, I'm like, I feel this. I know exactly what you're talking about in so many ways. The COVID test and anyway. So
we'll have to talk about that on my podcast when you come onto my show. And my wife grew up on Oahu in Kailua. And so she knows Hawaii really well.
Yes. Okay. We'll talk more about that. Thank you, Angus, for your time today. And everyone go find Angus. Yeah, he has some incredible book and incredible work. Thanks, Angus.
Thanks, Melissa. I appreciate being a part of the show.
Thanks for hanging out with us today on the Family Brand Podcast. But wait, before you go, I want to give you something. It's something I stole out of our Family Brand Academy because I thought it would make a big difference for you, and I want you to have it for free, no strings attached. It's how we run our family meetings, and not just our family meetings that we have every week, but also our family check-ins, which is the system we've developed for how to connect with our kids and each other, Chris and I, every single week. And we've had some great outcomes with this. Not only have we, but a lot of families that have implemented this have as well. Actually, life-changing outcomes, if I'm being honest. You'll definitely want to get this. Go get your copy at familybrand.com/meeting, and we will catch you next time.